Hey everybody, back again with one more Star Wars video related to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. In our last video where we went over to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge annual pass holder preview, at the end I said we needed to get you guys both a haul video of the merchandise that we've bought to date both in Disneyland and at Hollywood Studios, and that video will be uploaded separately. But I also wanted to do an overall review of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, my feelings on the land, the food, the merchandise, the experience, all of those pieces put together. For those of you, the very few that still haven't been to Galaxy's Edge, or for those of you that may want to hear somebody else's take on the land, if you've been there before. So I want to start with the size of the land. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, it's just huge. As you start to walk around, I think it's like 14 acres of land, and the Disneyland version and the Hollywood Studios version basically identical. I know some folks have said it's absolutely identical. There are a couple of nuances, as far as entrances and exits to the other lands, as well as like the DJ Rex capsule in Hollywood Studios, etc. But for the most part, virtually identical. Just huge, massive in scale, and massive enough that I remember back when I think it was Disneyland Paris that had the full-size or scale X-Wing outside of Star Tours, and thinking like, man, I really want an X-Wing or something. And now we don't only have an X-Wing, we have an X-Wing, an A-Wing, Kylo Ren ship, the Millennium Falcon, and these things are just, they're true to size. It's amazing to see that stuff in person in the scale that it's in. So as far as scale and the design and being enveloped by the land, it is 100% amazing. As for a fan, whether you're an original trilogy fan or prequel or new, etc., it's basically just coming out of the other part of the theme park, being cut off from it, and you're just enveloped with Star Wars. It is amazing. But I'm going to talk about the 900-pound gorilla in the room that everybody jumps on right away, and that is new Star Wars or not my Star Wars versus legacy Star Wars, and why did they do Galaxy's Edge with a new planet or a new experience, and why didn't they do Tatooine or Hoth or Endor or places that we know. And I remember back in 2013, the day that Disney was doing the 24 Hours of Disney, and it was kicking off their monstrous summer, leaving Magic Kingdom that day and getting a survey on the way out of the park about if they were to do some type of Star Wars land or expansion, what type of land would you want to see? And they had choices, like Tatooine or Hoth, etc. And I kind of went down Hoth down the way, and I know all the other folks that had gone through were answering things similarly, because this was also during I believe it was during a Star Wars Weekends day, so we had a lot of traffic going back and forth between Hollywood Studios for Star Wars Weekends and people getting surveyed. And I know some of the folks that were doing the surveys at that time for Disney, and the answers that they were receiving, I'm sure overwhelmingly historical, especially older Star Wars fans, are really looking for the older places to exist. You're looking for some type of a familiar location or places that, what Star Wars meant to you when you watched Star Wars when you were a kid. And I think, unfortunately, at this point, you really hit into multi-generational Star Wars fans that would be going to the park. There are people of my age that went to the original trilogies that were in the movie theater. Then you have people that were like of Jess's age who experienced the prequel trilogy, and then people that are on the cusp now and coming up, and they're experiencing Star Wars to be Rey or Finn and Phasma and the First Order, etc., like it or not. And it's not a point of just aging everybody out, because this land is, I believe, inclusive of the Star Wars saga altogether, but you don't have older characters. Folks that are familiar with Disney know that they struggle with certain, or with Disney Star Wars at least, from the acquisition, know that they struggle with some of the face characters from Star Wars to begin with. If you get it to a point now, if they continue doing Star Wars weekends and like Hyperspace Hoopla and things like that, or even the character meets, in Star Wars weekends, you always had like a Luke Skywalker who was kind of like the Tatooine version of Luke, and Leia in the flowing gown, etc. Now that you've introduced old Luke into canon in the newer movies, you start to really get into a quandary of, if you're going to go to the parks and you had these face characters, do you have old Luke? Do you have old Han Solo? Or do you keep, bring things out of sync with the timeline of, the original Tatooine Luke as well as Rey in the park, etc. So I think you start to run into a lot of continuity issues if you have some of the older characters involved with Galaxy's Edge. Chewbacca is, just one of these ageless characters, and ironically, it's kind of like the only alien that we see, and Galaxy's Edge also, but more on that in a minute. I think, my own opinion, and this is not the, I know this is a hip thing to say, the SJW way to carry the torch for Disney and not my Star Wars thing. I think they made a smart decision by going with a newer planet and keeping the newer gen, or the sequel trilogy of Star Wars isolated to this expansion land. And the reason being that you can choose your own adventure. You can, it's something that's unknown to you. So if you followed along with storyline, and there is a storyline also with the Disney Play app, if you go through the app and follow along with the story, there is a certain story or tasks that you're doing while you're in the land, as opposed to reliving a former battle or experience or things that you saw in the movies. So I guess it's a preferential thing, and I think that there's a lot of people, justifiably so, that want to see things that are older, but I think there's a lot more limitation to doing the older trilogy. If they went with older trilogy, once you do all of the items associated with the older trilogy, there is no introducing new characters or stories or things that they can do potentially with a land that's not tied down into canon firmly, at least as of yet. There is a drawback also with having this as a new land, or new to you, or new to all Star Wars fans, by the way of when you have a new planet or a new storyline altogether, all of a sudden the only way to convey that story is through comics, which they've released, or books which they've released for the backstory, etc., or these tiny references to Black Rock Spire, like in the Solo movie, etc. But they're so fast that even the most hardcore fans kind of miss them. It's difficult to get into a new planet or a new thing if it hasn't been referenced, at least in the movies. I mean, they could have had, keeping with new, they could have as easily done Jakku instead of Batu, which is very similar. Yet another planet that's kind of like desert-based, or any one of the newer planets that were part of the new trilogy. So I'm not a fan of any part of the new Star Wars where you need to have to, do all of these different media things to keep up. I don't want to feel like I need to read a comic to understand why C-3PO has a red arm, or read books to understand why Canto Bight is what it is. And that stuff is just, it's not fun to me. The other big knock that I could see about the land is that there are extremely limited characters. So you have Kylo Ren, which as of the time of this recording, we still did not see Kylo Ren on either of our trips to Galaxy's Edge. You have Rey, you have Chewbacca, and then you basically have First Order troopers, and then a new character that's a Resistance spy that we featured in our last video when we went to Passholder preview. There's no aliens, there's no creatures, There's a creature shop that there's a couple of magical type moving creatures in cages, but this is Star Wars. This is this would be the only planet I think that we've ever gone to in Star Wars that hasn't had some type of aliens attached to the planet. I'd rather see some type of Rhodians, etc. I mean, the only creature that you really see is Doc Ondar, who's Ithalorian, and he's behind a cage and animatronic. And the same thing with Hondo in the Millennium Falcon ride. You're not really seeing a variety of different characters. And that's something that I believe that Disney intended to have initially, as well as having a more robust interactivity in the land, with characters asking you about how you flew the Millennium Falcon and things like that. And those were all things that were sold to us when Star Wars Land was first announced, or Galaxy's Edge. And things that got cut really quickly with budget cuts, and then rely on the fact that when you go to vendors or cashiers or people in stores, or regular cast members along the way in Galaxy's Edge, that they're going to interact with you instead of having those types of aliens or different storylines, by basically saying lines that they're awful. Bright suns, traveler, or rising moons, or whatever the equal things are for like safe travels and things. It is genuinely awful, those lines, and incredibly frustrating at times too. In Disneyland, there were when we interacted with the cast members, there were a lot of non-character interactions. Thankfully so, when you're asking like what time is something happening or where is something, etc. In Galaxy's Edge for the passholder preview, different story. At Hollywood Studios, where we asked when Kylo Ren was coming out, and it's basically like, well, the Supreme Leader has his own time schedule and he doesn't tell us. And anything that you basically ask for, like where the bathrooms are, they have no idea where bathrooms are. If you ask like where where you could get the Coke detonator bottle, they don't know what Coca-Cola is, or they very frustrating when the only thing that you're getting out of some folks are bright suns, and I have to imagine that stuff will change. Could they change the ability to add aliens and some other Star Warsy type feel to things? Of course they could. It's just an investment in money for them to have to do so. But I think it's something that's really needed to bring the immersion to the level that it needs to be. There are, right now, as far as things to do in Galaxy's Edge, you have Smuggler's Run. The Rise of the Resistance is not open for a couple of months. And at Hollywood Studios it opens in December. Disneyland opens in January. But right now it's basically breaks down to the Falcon, checking out all the scenery, which could take hours. We spent 7 hours the first day just looking at all of the little nooks and crannies in the landscaping and the little Easter eggs and stuff. But you got the Falcon, shopping, looking around, food and beverages. Again, like I said at the top of the video, looking around, amazing. The Falcon ride, the queue is absolutely gorgeous. There's so many things to look at while you're waiting, so any type of time that you're spending in the queue is, to me, it doesn't feel like time is creeping along. Time is really moving quick because I want to be able to see all these different things. You walking around the Falcon, in the outdoor portion of the queue and looking at all of the little details on the Falcon, it's just beautiful. When you stand in front of that Millennium Falcon, it's almost tear-inducing as a hardcore fan, or even as a casual fan, I'm sure, to say that it is the freaking Millennium Falcon, full size, right in front of you, that you're walking around. Unfortunately, I think when you get into the ride, though, the rest of the queue is amazing. The hallways, it looks like the Millennium Falcon that we've seen, historically. There's a cargo bay that you get into, and kind of like the hollow chest table and everything before the queue area. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Get into the cockpit. It is the cockpit for the Millennium Falcon. It is beautiful. Huge geek out moments. Then you get to the actual ride. And the ride is, it's hard to say this without, if you're a hardcore fan, you probably say like Kyle's a jerk for saying this, but it's very much a video game. It's 6 people at a time, and you're watching a screen. Everything shakes. It feels like you're in the Falcon, and you're kind of pushing this button or moving this lever right and left or up and down or whatever, whatever's flashing around you. It's a lot of fun. It's immersive, but it is Dave and Buster-y type of fun, when you're immersed in the actual ride itself. I have to believe that the Rise of the Resistance ride is going to be much grander in scale, but overall fun factor for Smuggler's Run, it's a lot of fun, but the ride itself is the least bit, or the least selling point of Smuggler's Run altogether. Shopping, there's more stores there. It is virtually a Star Wars shopping mall, and it is very similar to Star Wars Weekends, when you would go and people would camp out online every Star Wars Weekends, opening weekend, for people to try to buy all the things that you'd think that only hardcore fans want, and there couldn't be that much of an audience, but there is, and things just fly off the shelves. When we went to Disneyland, a lot of the items that we were looking for were already sold out, and they were difficult to keep in stock. And same things happening in Galaxy's Edge. Even during pass holder previews, we noted that there were some things that were sold out already as well. But there's a lot of shopping to be done, and it is a huge money sink. By all means, like it is. There's pass holder discounts, I believe, in the stores, but outside of the store, it is just unbelievable how much money you could spend in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. The food is okay. The Ronto Roasters was a lot better than what I had anticipated. It's kind of like a sausage wrapped up with a slice of pork inside of it as well. Much better than I thought it would be. The food in Docking Bay 7, we had breakfast out in Disneyland. I had a standard like eggs and potatoes and fruit. It was good. Mary and Jess, I think, had some other things like the cinnamon roll or whatever roll that they had, and everything. Everything was fine. The dinner that we had the other night, the Cadu ribs and the tip yip chicken, was serviceable. All of the food, I think, for the way that they theme things at Galaxy's Edge is similar to Pandora at Animal Kingdom, with these kind of odd menus that you look at, and you'd sometimes, I think, you'd hope that there would just be like a hamburger, but it's Star Wars, they don't know what a hamburger is. So it is what it is. Good news is, if you don't like the food that's in Galaxy's Edge, you could certainly just walk back out to another section of the park and get something else to eat. But there's not a lot of standard fare that you're used to. The beverages at the cantina, they're okay. The beers I thought were really good. The mixed drinks are hit and miss. And unfortunately, you don't know if it's a hit or miss until you get them, and they're a little bit on the pricey side. So it's kind of, I'd say your mileage may vary, but it's really more crapshoot whether you're going to like the particular taste of what you're getting. The folks that we've been to the park with, that they've had mixed drinks, they've all seemed to enjoy them. The food, the Batu bits at the cantina were pretty good, and the Jello-like type substance was pretty good also. And then we have upcharges, right? So not only the canteen obviously is an upcharge, like everything you're doing within Galaxy's Edge it's just money coming out of your wallet, right? Shopping, food, beverages. There's upcharge events that you could do, like building a droid. We haven't built the droid yet, but it looks like it's fun. They look very similar to all of the other droids that we've had in the past, like the R2-D2 that follows you, or BB-8 that's remote control, etc. I do like that you could put like a personality chip in them to have them interact, but just hasn't been my thing to want to do that yet. The lightsaber building, it was a lot of fun. It is very expensive. So as of the time of this recording, it's $200 to build a lightsaber. That's including the lightsaber, the hilt, the kyber crystal that's inside of it, and the sleeve or packaging that you can carry it around with. There's a whole show that goes along with it. It's like 15-20 minutes long. It's a lot of fun, very expensive, especially if you're coming with a family of multiple kids, etc. It's not very much a toy for kids, I think. It's a little bit higher end that you'd kind of, at least I would have a heart attack if I saw it like being dropped on the floor or smashed around with each other. It's not the toy plastic lightsabers that you're used to seeing in the park. They're made out of metal, they're heavyweight, and more on the costly side. Every person that builds a saber can bring in a guest also, so you can watch somebody else do it. If you have a friend that's building one, you can go in and watch it and be part of the show. There were a lot of comments on the video that we did at Disneyland when we built the saber, and I pulled it out of the sleeve and ignited it for the first time, and the smile on my face. And I was a kid. It brought me right back to watching this stuff in the late 70s. I smiled from ear to ear, and I don't know the last time that I had that much enjoyment from something at a theme park. I think the big thing about Galaxy's Edge is it is what you make out of it. If you're going to go in predispositioned that you hate the new Star Wars and you hate the fact that there's a female lead character, or there's only 2 characters from the or 3 characters from the Resistance and 2 or 3 from the First Order, you're gonna find fault or find a way not to like things. I think again that there's things that could be improved with aliens or creatures and things to make it more immersive. I think when Rise of the Resistance opens, it's going to be a grand slam altogether. But I think the one thing that people need to consider also is that this is just a land within a park. It is a huge land and a huge expansion area, but it is a land within a park. This is not the entire park. So for everybody that's looking for so much more to do or different things, they're starting from scratch, they're implementing a land, and you can walk out of that land afterwards and go to Toy Story Land, or you can go on Rock and Roller Coaster or Tower of Terror and do different things within Hollywood Studios. But when you're in the land, you're enveloped in the area that you're in, and you walk out and you have the rest of a theme park. As far as this being small or not a lot to do, or there's not much to see, the last land that they opened up was Toy Story Land, and I could say Toy Story Land is very fun. I love Toy Story. I love the Slinky Dog coaster. This is it just dwarfs the area for like a Toy Story Land, and in my opinion, so much better than Toy Story Land in the interactivity, the scope of the land, the amount of things to see or the amount of things to do, and again, it's a land within the park. But those are the things that I'm thinking of as far as Galaxy's Edge goes, and this video went on quite a bit, and let me know your thoughts below. I know some of the comments that we've had in our videos for Galaxy's Edge have immediately either said like, not my Star Wars, or this sucks, or whatever, and there's a ridiculous rumor that's going out there the last week or so about George Lucas still owning the rights to all of the original characters, and Disney needing to pay him royalties of like 25% every time that they use like a Luke Skywalker, etc., and that's why they killed off things. And it's kind of comical. I think that there's a good deal of Star Wars haters at this point that are looking for anything, and if you want to believe that type of story, then you can believe that type of story. For those that listen to Rebel Force Radio, you guys can check out their episode that dropped the week that this video is dropping, because they do a lot of investigation about the rumor that George Lucas still owns the other characters, and they kind of debunk the whole rumor too. So in any event, that's enough yammering from me on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. I can't wait for all of you guys to be able to check it out yourselves and let me know how you like it. I also can't wait to hear all the stories of everyone bringing their lightsabers back on the plane home. One thing before we sign off, because I know folks asked us about the lightsaber experience when we built ours and flying back from California here. It was a bit of a hassle. TSA needed to pull us aside completely and took the sabers into a room that was separate from anybody being able to see anything, took apart the sabers to investigate everything, gave them back to us. then getting on the plane, it basically counts as your carry-on item for the plane. So if you're going on a plane that has a limited amount of carry-ons, like you can carry on one item and a personal item, this is your carry-on. They expect you to go in the overhead bin. It does not fit in some of the overhead bins, so we needed to put them lengthwise across our feet as we flew. So a little bit of a pain to bring those lightsabers back home. So in any event, that's all I have this time. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for all of your likes, comments, and subscriptions. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Have a great night. We'll see you guys.